The Mercy Falls Asylum, Part 1 of 7. The screams echoed through empty hallways. Construction workers ran from rooms that should have been abandoned for decades but were somehow spotlessly clean. And in the padded cells on the 4th floor, something waited. Something that had been feeding on madness and suffering for over 35 years. Something that was hungry for new patients. Hi everyone, welcome to 1% Crime. I know you can't sleep, so I'll accompany you with crime stories that happened all over the world. Before we get to the story, tell me, where did you hear it from? And if you like this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's jump straight into the story. October 12, 2018, Mercy Falls, Maine. The Mercy Falls State Asylum closed its doors in 1983 after a scandal that shocked the nation. Allegations of patient abuse, illegal experiments, and suspicious deaths led to a federal investigation that shut the facility down and sent 3 staff members to prison. The building sat abandoned for 35 years, slowly decaying in the Maine woods, a monument to cruelty and suffering. Until a developer bought the property in 2017 with plans to convert it into luxury condominiums. The building had good bones, solid construction from the 1920s when things were built to last. With some renovation, it could be transformed into high-end housing. The developer hired a construction crew to assess the building and begin preliminary work. That crew lasted 3 days before they all quit. Every single worker walked off the job, refusing to return no matter how much money they were offered. They reported hearing screams coming from empty rooms, seeing shadows moving in hallways where no one was standing, finding operating rooms that were spotlessly clean despite the building being abandoned for decades. And worst of all, they found patient records scattered throughout the building, records that should have been sealed and destroyed but were instead left behind, telling stories of horror that happened within these walls. The developer hired a new crew. They lasted 2 days. He hired a third crew. They lasted 4 hours. By the time the developer hired paranormal investigators to document what was happening in the building, hoping to either debunk the claims or turn the haunting into a marketing opportunity, 6 different construction crews had quit. 18 workers had reported psychological trauma requiring therapy, and 2 workers had been hospitalized after claiming they were attacked by invisible forces. The paranormal investigation team was led by Marcus Webb, a former skeptic turned believer after his experience at the Nightfall Motel. He had become something of an expert in places that existed between normal reality and something else. He brought a team of 5 with him: audio specialists, video technicians, and psychic mediums who claimed they could communicate with whatever remained in the asylum. They arrived on October 12, 2018, as autumn was turning the Maine woods into brilliant colors of red and gold. The asylum looked gothic and imposing, a massive brick structure with barred windows and a central tower that rose 4 stories into the air. Ivy covered most of the walls. Trees grew through cracked pavement in the parking lot. Nature was slowly reclaiming the building. But despite 35 years of abandonment, despite broken windows and weather damage, the building didn't feel empty. It felt occupied, watched, alive in a way that made Marcus's skin crawl. "This place is bad," said Catherine Moore, one of the psychic mediums. She had stopped at the front entrance, refusing to go further. "I've been in a lot of haunted locations, houses where murders happened, hotels where people died, but this is different. There's something old here, something that's been feeding for a long time." "Feeding on what?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Pain, suffering, madness. This was a mental hospital for 60 years. Thousands of people passed through these doors. Many of them died here, and from what I'm sensing, many of them suffered horribly before they died. That kind of concentrated anguish leaves an imprint, and sometimes that imprint becomes something more than just a memory. It becomes something alive." They entered the building. The main lobby was grand but decayed. A reception desk sat covered in dust and debris. Patient chairs were overturned. The floor was littered with old papers, broken glass, and things Marcus didn't want to identify. On the walls hung faded posters promoting mental health and recovery, cruel jokes in a place where recovery was the last thing patients found. The team set up base camp in the lobby. They unloaded equipment, infrared cameras, audio recorders, EMF detectors, motion sensors. Marcus had learned from his experience at the Nightfall Motel that places like this operated on different rules. Technology might not capture everything, but it would capture something. And sometimes, that something was enough to prove that the impossible was real. "Let's split into 2 teams," Marcus said. "Catherine, you're with me. We'll take the east wing, that's where the patient wards were. The rest of you take the west wing where the administrative offices were. We communicate every 15 minutes via radio. If anyone experiences anything unusual, you report it immediately. And if I say evacuate, we evacuate. No questions. Understood?" Everyone nodded. They had all signed waivers acknowledging the risks. They had all been briefed on what happened to the construction workers. They knew this wasn't a typical haunted house investigation. Marcus and Catherine headed east, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The asylum had no power, no lights, just the pale afternoon sun filtering through dirty windows. The hallway stretched ahead of them, lined with doors, patient rooms. Each door had a small window at eye level so staff could look in and check on patients, or watch them, or worse. Marcus looked through one of the windows. The room beyond was small, barely 8 feet by 10 feet. A metal bed frame sat bolted to the floor. Leather restraints hung from the bed frame, old and cracked but still intact. The walls were covered in scratch marks, deep gouges in the plaster where someone had clawed desperately, trying to escape or just trying to feel something, trying to prove they still existed. "They kept people in these rooms for weeks," Catherine whispered. "Months sometimes. Restrained, medicated, forgotten. Can you imagine what that does to a person? To be locked in a tiny room with no hope of release. To be at the mercy of people who see you as less than human." Marcus moved to the next room. This one was different. The walls were covered in writing, not carved into the plaster but written in something dark that Marcus hoped was just old paint. The writing was frantic, overlapping. Impossible to read in most places, but some phrases stood out. "They're watching through the walls. The doctor says I'm GTTING. Better but I'm not. Mercy falls but mercy never comes. Help me please, someone helping me." And then at the bottom, in larger letters, "We're still here." Marcus felt his EMF detector spike. The device measured electromagnetic fields, often associated with paranormal activity. The reading jumped from normal background levels to off the charts. The temperature in the hallway dropped suddenly. He could see his breath in the air. "Something's happening," Catherine said. Her eyes were wide, her breathing rapid. "The spirits are aware of us. They know we're here, and they're angry." From deeper in the asylum came a sound. A scream. High-pitched, agonized, inhuman. It echoed through the empty halls, bouncing off walls and doors until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Marcus grabbed his radio. "West Team report, did you hear that?" Static, then a voice distorted and barely audible. "We heard it, but Marcus, it didn't come from our wing, it came from yours. Are you okay?" "Yeah, Marcus stopped. At the end of the hallway, a door was opening, slowly. The hinges creaked. Beyond the door was darkness, absolute darkness that the flashlight couldn't penetrate. And from that darkness came voices. Dozens of voices. Hundreds. All of them speaking at once, overlapping, creating a cacophony of desperation and madness. "Help us, they hurt us, they cut us, they shocked us, they drowned us, they forgot us, we're still here, we're still suffering, help us. Join us, stay with us, forever, forever, forever." Catherine grabbed Marcus's arm. "We need to leave. Now, this isn't just a haunting. This is something active, something predatory. It wants us to stay. It wants to add us to its collection." But before they could turn and run, Every door in the hallway slammed open simultaneously, and from each room emerged something, not quite solid, not quite ghost, shapes that had once been human but had been twisted by years of suffering and madness into something else entirely. The spirits of Mercy Falls Asylum had been waiting for 35 years for someone to return, and now that someone had, they weren't going to let them leave. In Part 2, Marcus and his team fight to escape the asylum and discover that the building has one rule. Once you enter, you become a patient. Subscribe to the channel. The investigation continues. The Mercy Falls Asylum, Part 2 of 7. Welcome back. In Part 1, Marcus Webb and his paranormal investigation team entered the abandoned Mercy Falls Asylum and awakened something that had been waiting for 35 years. Today, they fight to escape as the asylum tries to make them permanent residents. This is Part 2. The investigation continues. The spirits came at them from every direction, not walking but gliding, their forms flickering between solid and translucent. They wore hospital gowns from different eras, some from the 1920s, some from the 1970s. Men and women, young and old, all of them with the same expression of suffering etched onto their faces. Marcus and Catherine ran. They sprinted back down the hallway toward the lobby, their flashlights bouncing wildly, casting crazy shadows on the walls. Behind them, the spirits followed, not chasing exactly, more like flowing, like water filling a space. Marcus's radio crackled. "Marcus, West Team here, the door's locked, we can't get out. The exit doors are locked and the windows won't break. We're trapped." "Meet us in the lobby," Marcus shouted into the radio. "Everyone converge on the lobby now." They burst into the lobby to find the rest of the team already there, huddled together near their equipment. The 5 investigators looked terrified. One of them, a young woman named Amy, was crying silently. "The building locked us in," said David Park, the audio specialist. "The moment you radioed about the spirits, every exit sealed itself. Doors locked. Windows became solid, like they're not even windows anymore, just walls painted to look like windows. We're trapped." Marcus looked at the front entrance they had walked through just an hour ago. The double doors were still there, but when he tried the handles, they wouldn't budge. When he looked through the glass, he saw something impossible. Instead of the parking lot and the autumn woods, he saw a hallway. Another hallway inside the asylum. As if the building had folded in on itself, replacing exits with more interior space. "It's making itself bigger," Catherine said. She was pale, shaking. "The asylum is expanding, creating more rooms, more hallways. It's been empty for 35 years and now it has guests again. It wants to keep us. It wants to make us patients." From the east wing came the sound of footsteps, lots of footsteps. The spirits were coming. Marcus could see them now, dozens of them, emerging from the hallway they had just escaped from. And they weren't alone. More spirits were coming from the west wing, from the stairwells, from everywhere. "Upstairs," Marcus decided. "We go up. Maybe there's a way out on the upper floors." They ran for the stairs, climbing to the second floor. The stairwell was narrow and dark, the steps slick with moisture and something else Marcus didn't want to identify. They emerged onto the second floor hallway and immediately knew they'd made a mistake. This floor was different from the first, darker, colder. The walls were covered in padding, the kind used in rooms for violent patients, and the smell was overwhelming, disinfectant mixed with decay, blood, and human waste. This was where they had kept the most dangerous patients, the ones who screamed all night, the ones who attacked staff, the ones who were too violent or too mad even for the regular wards. "We need to go back," Amy whispered. "Please, Marcus, we need to get out of here." But when they turned back to the stairs, they found them blocked, not by spirits this time, but by solid wall. The stairwell they had just climbed no longer existed. It had been replaced by smooth, padded wall, as if the stairs had never been there at all. It's changing the building, Dr. Elena Martinez, the team's historian, said. She was trying to stay calm, trying to think analytically. The asylum isn't just haunted, it's alive. It's rearranging itself, trapping us, changing exits into walls and rooms into different rooms. We're inside something that doesn't follow normal spatial rules. Marcus checked his phone. No signal. He checked his GPS. It showed their location as coordinates that didn't exist, somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The building had cut them off completely from the outside world. If we can't go down, we go forward, Marcus said. There has to be another way out, another stairwell, emergency exits, fire escapes. This building has to have multiple exits. They moved down the second-floor hallway. The doors here were different from the first floor. These were heavy steel with small windows reinforced with wire mesh. Rooms for patients who needed to be contained. Through the windows, Marcus could see padded cells, some with restraint chairs bolted to the floor, some with nothing but walls and a drain in the center. And in some of the cells he saw people. Not spirits, people, living people. They wore hospital gowns and sat or stood in their cells, staring blankly at nothing. When Marcus passed their windows, they didn't react, didn't move, just stared with empty eyes. Those are the construction workers, Catherine said, her voice hollow. The ones who disappeared. The ones who were hospitalized claiming they were attacked. They never left. They're still here. The asylum made them patients. Marcus stopped at one cell. Inside was a man he recognized from news reports, Jake Morrison, one of the workers who had gone missing 2 months ago. His family had been searching for him. Police had found his car in the parking lot, but no sign of Jake himself. Marcus pounded on the door. Jake Morrison, can you hear me? Jake didn't respond. He just sat in the corner of his padded cell, rocking slightly, staring at nothing. He can't hear you, Catherine said. He's not really here anymore. His body is here, but his mind. The asylum took his mind, made him a patient, convinced him he belongs here, that he's always belonged here, that he's sick and needs treatment. How do we break them out? Marcus demanded. You don't, said a voice behind them. They spun around. Standing in the hallway was a man wearing a white doctor's coat from the 1950s. He was translucent, clearly a spirit, but more coherent than the others, more present. I'm Dr. Henry Marsh. I was the chief psychiatrist here from 1955 to 1979, and I'm here to explain your situation. You're a ghost, Amy said. I prefer residual consciousness, Dr. Marsh replied with a thin smile. I died in this building, heart attack in my office, and my death was, well, let's say I had regrets, things I had done, treatments I had administered, patients I had failed. My guilt kept me here, and over the years I've watched what this place has become. What has it become? Marcus asked. A living entity that feeds on madness and suffering. When the asylum was operational, thousands of people suffered here. That suffering soaked into the walls, into the foundation, into the very concept of what this place was. And when the asylum closed, all that accumulated anguish had nowhere to go. So it became aware. It became hungry. It became this. A building that traps people and makes them patient so it can feed on their sanity and their suffering. How do we escape? David asked. Dr. Marsh looked sad. You don't. Not unless you give the asylum what it wants. It needs patience. It needs people to suffer. If you want to leave, someone has to stay. Someone has to volunteer to become a permanent patient. Someone has to take the place of those who are already trapped here. That's insane, Marcus said. We're not leaving anyone behind. Then you'll all stay, Dr. Marsh said simply. And eventually you'll all become patients. The asylum will break you, one by one. It will show you your fears, your traumas, your guilt. It will convince you that you're sick, that you need treatment, that you belong here. And once you believe that, you'll be just like Jake Morrison, a body in a cell, a mind lost to madness. There has to be another way, Catherine insisted. There is, Dr. Marsh admitted, but it's dangerous. and it requires you to go deeper into the asylum, to the fourth floor, to the treatment rooms where the worst procedures happen. That's where the asylum's heart is, where its consciousness is strongest. If you can reach it and somehow break its power, you might be able to free everyone, the spirits, the trapped workers, yourselves. But no one who's gone to the fourth floor has ever come back. Marcus looked at his team. 6 terrified people who had signed up to investigate a haunting and had instead walked into a trap. He thought about Jake Morrison and the other workers, trapped in cells with their minds stolen. He thought about the hundreds of spirits, still suffering decades after death. And he made a decision. "We go to the fourth floor," Marcus said. "We find the heart of this thing and we end it, all of us together." "You'll die," Dr. Marsh warned. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But at least we'll die fighting. Better than spending eternity as a patient in a hospital that doesn't exist." Dr. Marsh nodded slowly. "Very well, I'll show you the way. Follow me. And whatever you do, don't open any doors you don't have to. Some rooms in this asylum contain things far worse than spirits." They followed Dr. Marsh deeper into the second floor, heading toward a stairwell that would take them up to the third floor, and eventually to the fourth, to the Heart of Mercy Falls Asylum, to the source of the nightmare. Behind them, the spirits continued to gather, hundreds of them now, filling the hallways, watching silently as the living walked deeper into their domain, waiting to see if these visitors would escape or join them in eternal suffering. In Part 3, the team reaches the third floor and discovers the experimental treatment rooms where the asylum's darkest secrets are hidden. Subscribe to the channel. The horror deepens. The Mercy Falls Asylum, Part 3 of 7. Dr. Marsh led them through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked. Hallways that had been straight became curved. Doors that had been on the left appeared on the right. The asylum was alive, rearranging itself, creating a maze designed to trap them forever. They climbed a narrow staircase to the third floor. The air grew colder with each step. Marcus could see his breath forming clouds in the flashlight beam. The temperature had dropped to what felt like near freezing, despite it being a mild October day outside. The third floor was worse than the second, much worse. This was where the experimental treatments had been conducted, the procedures that the asylum had kept secret, the therapies that had been too controversial, too dangerous, too inhumane to perform in the regular treatment rooms. The hallway was lined with doors marked with faded labels: hydrotherapy, electroshock therapy, lobotomy suite, insulin shock treatment, isolation chamber. Each door was a monument to suffering, a place where people had been subjected to procedures that destroyed their minds in the name of healing them. "They did terrible things on this floor," Dr. Marsh said quietly. His ghostly form flickered in the dim light. "I did terrible things on this floor. We believed we were helping. We believed that shocking the brain, drowning patients in ice baths, cutting into their frontal lobes, we believed these were treatments. But they were torture, and the patients knew it. They screamed and begged and fought, but we held them down and did it anyway." "Why are you helping us?" Catherine asked. "If you were part of this, why would you want us to destroy the asylum?" Dr. Marsh stopped walking and turned to face them. His expression was haunted, filled with decades of guilt. "Because I've had 39 years to watch what I helped create. 39 years of seeing the spirits of my patients, still suffering, still trapped in the moments of their worst pain. I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can help end it. Maybe that's my penance." They reached a door marked Surgery Suite 3. Dr. Marsh gestured toward it. "This is where it's strongest, the heart of the asylum's consciousness. This is where the worst procedures happened, where patients died on the operating table, where we performed experimental surgeries that had no medical justification. This room has seen more suffering than any other place in this building." Marcus tried the door. It was unlocked. It swung open to reveal an operating room that looked like it was from a nightmare. A surgical table sat in the center, complete with leather restraints. Around it stood equipment: old medical devices, some recognizable, some whose purpose Marcus couldn't begin to guess. The walls were tiled in white, but the tiles were stained with rust-colored marks that could only be blood. And in the corner, sitting in a wheelchair, was something that made Marcus's blood freeze. A figure, human-shaped but wrong. Its hospital gown was clean and white, but its skin was gray and papery. Its eyes were open but empty, reflecting no light. And when it spoke, its voice was like wind through a broken window, hollow, cold, inhuman. "Welcome to Mercy Falls," it said. "I am the asylum. I am the accumulated consciousness of 60 years of suffering. I am every patient who died here, every scream that echoed in these halls, every mind that broke under treatment. And you have come to destroy me." "Yes," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've come to free the people you've trapped, to end this." The figure laughed. It was a terrible sound, like screaming played backward. "Free them? You can't free them. They are me now, I am them. We are one. The patients, the staff, the building, all merged into a single consciousness. And you think you can destroy that?" "We can try," Elena said. She stepped forward, pulling out something from her bag, a thick file folder. "I researched this building's history. I found the original architectural plans. This room, Surgery Suite 3, is built directly above the old foundation. Before the asylum was built, this land held something else. A cemetery. An unmarked cemetery where they buried people who died in the original building that stood here. A tuberculosis sanatorium from 1895. The figure in the wheelchair tilted its head. "Clever. Yes, this land has always been a place of death. The sanatorium, then the asylum, layer upon layer of suffering and death. It soaked into the ground, into the stones, into reality itself. This is a thin place, a weak spot where the boundary between life and death is permeable, and I am what grows in such places." "Then we seal it," Marcus said. "We close the weak spot. We cut off your connection to whatever feeds you." "You can't," the figure said simply. "I am too strong now. Too many people have suffered here. Too many spirits are bound to this place. Even if you destroy the building, even if you burn it to the ground, I will remain. I am not the building. I am the suffering itself." Dr. Marsh spoke up. "But suffering can end. That's what you're afraid of. If we can free the spirits, if we can help them move on, you lose your power. You're not made of the building or the land. You're made of their trapped consciousness. And if they're no longer trapped, you no longer exist." The figure stood up from the wheelchair. As it rose, it changed. It grew taller, its form becoming less human and more like a shadow with too many limbs. The temperature in the room dropped even further. Frost formed on the walls. The surgical equipment began to shake and rattle. "I will not allow you to free them," the entity said, its voice now a chorus of thousands speaking at once. "They belong to me, they are me, and you will join us, all of you. You will become patients, you will suffer, you will feed me. Forever." The door behind them slammed shut. The lights that shouldn't work in an abandoned building, flickered on harsh fluorescent bulbs that cast everything in sickly white light. And around the room, spirits began to materialize. Dozens of them, patients in hospital gowns, doctors in white coats, nurses in old-fashioned uniforms, all of them with empty eyes and expressions of eternal suffering. "Seize them," the entity commanded. "Prepare them for treatment." The spirits moved forward. Marcus and his team backed against the wall, surrounded. David pulled out a crowbar he'd been carrying and swung at the nearest spirit, but the metal passed through it harmlessly. These weren't physical beings. They couldn't be fought with conventional weapons. But Catherine had an idea. "Dr. Marsh," she called out. "You said you've been here for 39 years. You said you wanted to help us. Help us now. Help us fight this thing." Dr. Marsh looked uncertain. "I'm just one spirit among thousands. What can I do?" "You can remember who you were," Catherine said urgently. "Not Dr. Henry Marsh, the psychiatrist who tortured patients, but Henry Marsh, the man, the person you were before guilt and regret bound you here. If you can remember your humanity, you can break free. And if you can break free, you can help others break free. Dr. Marsh closed his eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he began to glow, faint at first, then brighter. The light came from within him, a warm golden light that pushed back the cold and the darkness. "I remember," Dr. Marsh said, his voice changing, becoming more human. "I remember being a young doctor who wanted to help people, before the asylum corrupted me, before I became part of the machine. I remember having dreams, having hope, having love. I remember being human." The light grew stronger, and as it did, something remarkable happened. The spirits around them began to glow too. One by one, they started to remember who they had been before the asylum trapped them, before suffering defined them, before they became part of the entity. A woman in a patient gown looked at her hands in wonder. I'm Margaret Henderson. I was a teacher. I had a family. I was a person, not just a patient." A man in a doctor's coat touched his face. "I'm Thomas Richards. I was a surgeon. I tried to help people. I failed, but I tried. I was more than my failures." The entity shrieked, a sound like metal tearing, like reality breaking. "No, you are mine. You belong to me. You are suffering. You are madness. You are mercy, FALLS." But the light spread. More spirits remembered. More found themselves beneath the layers of trauma and suffering. And as they remembered, they began to fade, not disappearing but ascending, finally moving on to whatever came after death. The entity fought back. The room shook. Equipment flew through the air. The surgical table lifted off the ground and crashed into the wall. But it was losing. With each spirit that broke free, the entity grew weaker. Marcus realized what they needed to do. Everyone, help them remember, talk to the spirits, remind them who they were, help them break free. The team spread out, each person approaching a different spirit, speaking to them, asking them their names, asking them about their lives before the asylum. It was slow work. Each spirit needed time to remember, to piece together their identity from the fragments the asylum had left them. But it was working. The entity's control was breaking. The asylum's consciousness was fragmenting as the individual spirits reclaimed their individuality. And in the chaos, Marcus saw something. A door in the wall that hadn't been there before. A door marked exit. "There," he shouted. "The building is losing its hold. It can't maintain the maze anymore. That's our way out." But the entity wasn't finished. It gathered itself for one final attack, pulling power from the remaining trapped spirits, drawing on decades of accumulated suffering. The shadow form grew massive, filling the entire room, and it spoke with the voice of 1,000 tortured souls. "If I cannot keep you, then I will destroy you. This building will become your tomb." In Part 4, the asylum begins to collapse as Marcus and his team race to free the remaining spirits and escape before they're buried alive. Subscribe to the channel. The battle continues. The Mercy Falls Asylum, Part 4 of 7. The building began to shake, not like an earthquake, but like something alive convulsing in pain. Cracks appeared in the walls, spreading like spider webs across the tiles. The ceiling groaned. Dust and debris rained down from above. "It's collapsing," Amy screamed. "The building is coming down." "No," Dr. Marsh said, his glowing form still bright with newfound humanity. "It's not collapsing. It's dying. The entity is losing control. Without the trapped spirits to sustain it, the consciousness that held this place together is fragmenting. The building is reverting to what it really is, an abandoned structure that should have fallen apart decades ago." Marcus grabbed Catherine's arm. "We need to get everyone out. Now. David, Alina, Amy, head for that exit door. Dr. Marsh, help us free as many spirits as you can before this place comes down." They split up. Half the team ran for the exit door that had appeared, while Marcus, Catherine, and Dr. Marsh stayed behind to help the remaining spirits. There were still dozens of them, still trapped, still under the entity's control. The entity itself had become desperate. Its shadow form thrashed wildly, smashing equipment, tearing at the walls. I am Mercy Falls, I am eternal, I cannot die, I will not die. But it was dying. With each spirit that broke free and ascended, the entity lost more of itself. It was like watching a giant made of sand being washed away by the tide, grain by grain, until nothing remained. Marcus approached an elderly man in a patient gown. The man stood motionless, staring at nothing, completely under the entity's control. "Sir," Marcus said gently, "can you hear me? What's your name?" No response. The man's eyes were empty. "Try harder," Dr. Marsh urged. "The entity's hold is weakening. You can reach him. Tell him about the outside world. Remind him that there's more than just suffering, that there was life before this place." Marcus tried again. "It's 2018 out there, October. The leaves are changing colors, red and gold and orange. The air smells like wood smoke and autumn. There's a world out there beyond these walls, a world you once knew. Don't you want to remember it?" Something flickered in the man's eyes, a spark of awareness. "Autumn," he whispered. I remember autumn. I remember raking leaves with my son. I remember his laughter. His name was David. My son's name was David." "Yes," Marcus encouraged. "What's your name? Who are you?" I'm George Patterson. I was a carpenter. I built houses. I had a family. The man's eyes filled with tears. "I was a person. I was alive." George Patterson began to glow, just like Dr. Marsh. And then he faded, ascending, finally free after decades of imprisonment. Catherine was doing the same with a young woman. Alina had returned from checking the exit and was helping too. One by one, they reached the trapped spirits, helped them remember, helped them break free. But the building was deteriorating fast. The floor beneath them cracked. Entire sections of ceiling collapsed. The surgical table was crushed under falling debris. The entity's final thrashing was destroying everything. "We're out of time," Alina shouted. "We need to leave now or we'll be buried here." "Not yet," Marcus insisted. "There are still more. Look in the other rooms. There are spirits in every room on this floor. We can't leave them." Dr. Marsh moved toward the doorway. "I'll go. I can move faster than you can. I'll wake as many as I can. You three get to safety. This is my responsibility. Let me finish it." "Dr. Marsh, if you stay," Catherine started. "I'm already dead," Dr. Marsh said with a sad smile. "And I've been trapped here by my own guilt for 39 years. But helping you today, helping these spirits break free, this is the first good thing I've done in all that time. Let me do this. Let me finally be a healer instead of a torturer." Before anyone could argue, Dr. Marsh flew through the walls, moving from room to room, speaking to every spirit he could find. Marcus could see flashes of light through the walls as spirits began to awaken, remember, and ascend. "Come on," Alina said, pulling Marcus toward the exit. "We have to trust him. We have to go." They ran down the hallway, dodging falling debris, jumping over cracks in the floor. Behind them, the entity's screams grew weaker, more desperate, until finally they stopped altogether. The exit door led to a stairwell, a real stairwell this time, not one of the asylum's tricks. They descended as fast as they could, the building collapsing around them. Second floor, first floor, ground level. They could see daylight ahead, real daylight streaming through the front entrance. David, Amy, and the rest of the team were waiting by the exit, having made it down ahead of them. "Come on," David shouted. "The whole structure is coming down." They burst through the front doors and into the parking lot, running across the cracked pavement, not stopping until they were a safe distance from the building. Then they turned to watch. Mercy Falls Asylum was collapsing. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, inevitably. Walls crumbled. The roof caved in. The tower that had stood for almost a century tilted and fell. Brick by brick, the building that had been a monument to suffering was being reduced to rubble. And as it fell, lights rose from the ruins. Hundreds of lights, thousands. Every spirit that had been trapped, Every consciousness that had been bound to that terrible place was finally ascending, finally free. Marcus thought he saw Dr. Marsh among them, a glowing figure in a white coat, looking peaceful for the first time in decades, rising into the autumn sky with all the others. The collapse took 20 minutes. When it was over, nothing remained of the Mercy Falls Asylum except a pile of bricks and twisted metal. The entity was gone, the spirits were free, and the land, for the first time in over a century, was just land again, no longer a thin place, no longer a weak spot in reality. The team stood in silence, processing what they had just experienced. Finally, Amy spoke. What about the trapped workers, Jake Morrison and the others? They were still in the building. Marcus's heart sank. In the chaos of freeing the spirits and escaping the collapse, he had forgotten about the living people who had been turned into patients. We need to search the rubble. They might still be. Marcus, Catherine pointed. From the ruins, figures were emerging, confused, disoriented, but alive. Jake Morrison stumbled out, followed by 2 other construction workers. They looked around in bewilderment, as if waking from a long dream. What happened? Jake asked. I was in a hospital room. There were doctors. They were treating me. I was sick, they said. I needed to stay, but now. He looked at the ruins. How long was I in there? 2 months, Marcus told him. But you're safe now. The asylum is gone. Over the next hour, they found all 6 missing construction workers alive in the rubble. None of them were physically injured despite the building collapsing around them. It was as if, when the entity died, its hold on physical reality had broken completely, allowing the trapped people to simply phase through the falling debris. Emergency services arrived. Fire trucks, ambulances, police. Marcus and his team were treated for minor injuries and shock. The construction workers were taken to the hospital for evaluation, but doctors found nothing wrong with them except confusion and memory gaps. The developer, when he heard what happened, immediately abandoned his plans to build condos. He sold the land to the state, which declared it a memorial site for the victims of the asylum's abuse. A small park would be built there, with a monument listing the names of everyone who had died in Mercy Falls, a reminder of what had happened, and a promise that it would never happen again. That night as Marcus drove home, his phone rang. It was Alina. I've been researching, she said, looking into other abandoned asylums, other hospitals, other places where people suffered. Marcus, there are dozens of them, maybe hundreds, places just like Mercy Falls, places where the suffering created something, aware, something predatory. Are you saying there are more? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. I'm saying Mercy Falls might have been the first one we've dealt with, but it won't be the last. Someone needs to find these places. Someone needs to help the spirits trapped there. Someone needs to stop these entities before they trap more people. Marcus thought about Dr. Marsh, about his redemption, about how one person could make a difference even after death. Then we'll do it, he said. We'll find them, all of them, and we'll free them. In part 5, 6 months later, Marcus and his team investigate their second haunted asylum and discover that not all of these places can be saved. Subscribe to the channel. The mission continues. The Mercy Falls Asylum, Part 5 of 7. April 18, 2019, 6 months after the collapse. Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the property line, staring at the rebuilt asylum. New walls, reinforced foundations, state-of-the-art safety systems. The building looked pristine, too pristine. Sarah Chin pulled up beside him, her face drawn and pale. The last 6 months had changed them all. You shouldn't have called me, she said. But you came anyway. The dreams wouldn't stop. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. Every night I hear them, the patients, calling for help. Marcus showed her his phone, emails from night security guards, all reporting the same things. Footsteps in empty hallways, doors that locked from the inside, shadows that moved against the light. and screams at 3:17 a.m. "They want us to come back," Sarah whispered. "Don't they?" "I think we never really left." The sound of another vehicle approaching made them both turn. Detective James Morrison climbed out of an unmarked sedan, followed by Dr. Elizabeth Hartley. The psychologist looked older, her usually perfect hair streaked with more gray than Marcus remembered. "The whole team," Sarah said. "You called everyone." "Not everyone," Marcus's jaw tightened. "David's family said he's in a psychiatric facility in Boston, won't speak, just draws the same image over and over." "What image?" Morrison asked. "The door in the basement, the one we never found." Dr. Hartley pulled out a folder. The original architect's plans showed a sub-basement level, sealed off during construction in 1932. Official reason: structural instability. Unofficial reason? Sarah asked. "The architect died 2 weeks after opening. Suicide." Dr. Hartley's hands shook, but he left a journal. She showed them a photocopy of frantic handwriting. "They made me build it, said it was for treatment rooms, but I saw the symbols in the blueprints. I know what they were really building. God forgive me. I gave them a door that should never be opened, and I buried the key in the foundation." Morrison let out a long breath. "A door to what?" He never said. The rest of the journal pages were torn out. Dr. Hartley closed the folder. "But 3 days ago, the construction crew found something while repairing the foundation." She pulled out her phone, showing a photograph. A metal box embedded in concrete. Inside, an iron key covered in writhing symbols. The foreman took it home. That night his wife found him in the garage, trying to drive through the wall. Kept saying he had to open it. "Where's the key now?" Marcus asked. "In my car. Lead-lined box." Dr. Hartley met his gaze. "I was hoping you'd tell me to throw it in the ocean." "And if I did?" "I'd still have the dreams, we all would, because it's not about the key, is it? It's about what the key represents." She paused. "Permission." Sarah laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Permission to do what? Walk back into hell?" "Permission to finish what we started." Marcus finally said what they were all thinking. "Last time we ran, we let it collapse, but the asylum is still here, rebuilt, waiting, and whatever is inside is stronger now." Morrison pulled out his weapon, checked it, holstered it. "I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in evil, and some places trap it." He looked at each of them. "If we're going in, we go prepared, together." "We barely survived last time," Sarah protested. "The workers will keep coming," Marcus said. "More guards, more crews, getting hurt, going crazy, because this place wants us." The sun was setting behind the asylum, casting long shadows across the grounds. In the fading light, Marcus could see movement in the fourth-floor windows. Figures, standing still, watching. "It's been feeding on their fear for 6 months, Dr. Hartley said. "Every worker who ran, every guard who quit. It's stronger now than it was during our first investigation." "Then why does it want us back?" Morrison asked. Marcus finally voiced the terrible suspicion that had been growing in his mind since the collapse. "Because we're not investigators anymore. We're survivors. We felt it, touched it, became part of its story." He turned to face them all. "I think it marked us, and now it wants to finish the job." Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went pale. "It's from David." Her voice cracked. "He hasn't spoken in 6 months." She turned the phone so they could all see. A single text message. No words, just an image. David had photographed one of his drawings. It showed 5 figures standing in front of a door. Above the door, written in shaky letters, "Come home." "Jesus Christ," Morrison breathed. Dr. Hartley was already walking toward her car. "I'm getting the key." "Wait," Marcus grabbed her arm. "We don't go in tonight, we plan this. Research. Find out everything we can about that sub-basement level, what they were doing down there, why it was sealed. And if we wait, how many more people get hurt?" It was a fair question. Marcus didn't have a good answer. Morrison's radio crackled, the police band. A familiar voice, dispatcher Amy Rodriguez. All units, we have a 1054 at the Mercy Falls Asylum. Construction worker reports he's trapped inside. Claims the doors have locked and he can't get out. They all looked at the asylum. The sun had fully set now. Every window was dark. Except one. The fourth floor, the padded cell at the far end. Light spilled from that single window, not electric light, something else. Something that pulsed like a heartbeat. Morrison was already running for his car, radio in hand. "This is Detective Morrison. I'm on site. I'm going in." "Wait," Marcus shouted, but Morrison was already sprinting toward the main entrance. The three of them ran after him. By the time they reached the doors, Morrison had them open. He stood in the threshold, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness inside. The hallway beyond was spotless, freshly painted walls, new linoleum floors, but the air that rolled out was wrong, too cold, too thick, and underneath the smell of fresh paint was something else. Decay and formaldehyde, and beneath that the copper tang of old blood. From deep inside the building, they heard a man screaming. Morrison looked back at them once, then he stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him with a sound like a coffin closing. Marcus grabbed the handle. Locked, he pounded on the door. "Morrison, can you hear me?" Nothing, just the fatting echo of screams. Sarah pulled out her phone, calling 911. Dr. Hartley ran back to her car. When she returned, she was carrying the lead line box. "I guess we're not waiting," she said, opening the box. The key gleamed in the darkness. Even through the lead, Marcus could feel it. A pull, a whisper at the edges of his mind. "Come home." The voice was many voices, all the patients, all the staff, all the lost souls trapped in the walls. "Come home and open the door. Come home and set us free. Or condemn us all," Marcus whispered. Sarah ended her call. "Police are 10 minutes out. Fire Department 15. Morrison doesn't have that long." Marcus took the key from the box. The metal was warm, alive. The symbols etched into its surface seemed to move under his fingers, rearranging themselves into patterns he almost recognized, almost understood. The main door suddenly swung open. The hallway beyond was no longer empty. Someone stood in the darkness, tall, thin, wearing a white coat stained with something dark. The figure's head tilted at an impossible angle, as if the neck had been broken and poorly reset. When it spoke, its voice was wet and ruined. "Dr. Webb, we've been expecting you." It wasn't Morrison. It was the foreman who'd found the key, the one who tried to drive through his garage wall. He smiled and his teeth were all wrong. Too many, too sharp. "The door is hungry," he said, "and you brought the key." Then he stepped back into the darkness and vanished. From somewhere deep in the asylum, Marcus heard Morrison screaming. Not in pain, in terror, the kind of terror that breaks minds. Sarah gripped his arm. "We need to leave, now, before it's too late." But Marcus was staring at the key in his hand, at the symbols that now made terrible sense. "It's already too late," he said. "It was too late the moment they rebuilt this place." Dr. Hartley's voice was barely a whisper. "Then what do we do?" Marcus looked at the open doors, at the darkness that waited beyond, at the key that pulsed in his hand like a second heart. "We finish it, one way or another." He stepped through the threshold. The asylum swallowed him whole. And as Sarah and Dr. Hartley stood frozen in horror, they heard a sound from deep below, from the sub-basement that shouldn't exist, from behind the door that should never be opened. Something massive, something ancient, something that had been waiting for 90 years. Waking up. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to the channel. The Mercy Falls Asylum, Part 6 of 7. The darkness inside was absolute. Sarah and Dr. Hartley ran in after Marcus. The door stayed open, waiting for more. Their flashlights revealed walls covered in photographs. Thousands of them. Every patient who had died in Mercy Falls. In every photo, the eyes were scratched out. "Marcus," Sarah's voice echoed wrong. Morrison's distant voice came from above. "Get out, it's not what we thought." Then wet, choking silence. Sarah's phone flickered. No signal. Text messages from dead people appeared. Then a video call from David. He was in his hospital room, but something stood behind him. Something tall in a 1932 doctor's coat. Its face shifted through every doctor who had worked at Mercy Falls. David's lips moved. "The door is downstairs. He's waiting for the key." The call ended. A scream echoed through the building. "Marcus." They ran, finding stairs leading down. Messages dripped on the walls. "Some places can't be SAVID, and some doors should stay closed. But you brought the key." They descended into the basement. Morrison sat against a wall, his empty weapon beside him. The wall was riddled with bullet holes. "I shot it," he mumbled. "But it kept coming, wearing their faces. It showed me what they did here, the experiments, the lobotomies. Children, Sarah, they did it to children." Drag marks on the floor led deeper into the darkness. "Don't follow," Morrison whispered. "This place isn't haunted, it's alive. Been feeding on suffering for 90 years, that's what it wants." But they had no choice. Marcus's voice echoed from below, layered with hundreds of others. "I found it, the door, come see." They followed the marks deeper. Dr. Hartley's light caught ancient text carved in Latin. "Here lies the threshold between suffering and eternity, built to contain that which feeds on pain, sealed by blood, opened by will. May God forgive what walks below." "Below," Sarah whispered. "We're already in the basement." "No," Dr. Hartley said. "This is the first basement. The sub-basement is below." They found more stairs descending into absolute darkness. Their flashlight beams didn't penetrate more than a few feet. Marcus's voice drifted up. "I can see it, the door, it's beautiful." Laughter echoed, not Marcus's laugh, a chorus. Men, women, children, all the voices of the dead. Dr. Hartley pulled out a video camera. "I'm recording this. If we don't make it out, at least there'll be evidence." They descended. The stone walls gave way to earth. Pale roots pushed through the soil, poolsing like veins, all leading down. The air grew heavy. It tasted of formaldehyde and decay and something worse. The sub-basement was a single massive room. The walls were lined with treatment chairs, each holding skeletal remains of patients who had been strapped down and forgotten. In the center stood Marcus. He faced a massive iron door covered in symbols. The door was built into stone that looked older than the asylum, older than America, older than anything. Marcus held the key with both hands. Blood ran from his nose and ears, but he was smiling. "It's been calling through the dreams," he said without turning. "Every night, and now I understand. The asylum was never built to help people. It was built as a feeding ground to create suffering, to generate pain, because that's what it eats." "What eats, Marcus?" Dr. Hartley asked, her camera recording. "The thing behind the door." Marcus turned to face them. His eyes were completely black. "The thing they summoned in 1932. The thing they couldn't destroy. It's been growing stronger with every death, every scream, every moment of agony." He turned back and inserted the key. The sound was obscene, like bones breaking, like flesh tearing, like 1,000 voices screaming. "Marcus, please," Sarah ran toward him. "You don't have to do this." "But I do," Marcus turned the key. "Because if I don't, it'll keep calling, keep hurting people. At least this way I can see it, maybe even stop it." The lock clicked. The door swung open. Beyond it was not a room. It was an absence, a void so complete that looking at it felt like falling. And in that void something moved, something massive that had been waiting 90 years to be seen. The thing that emerged was made of suffering itself. Every scream, every tear, every moment of pain woven into a form that hurt to perceive. It had no fixed shape. A mass of faces, hands, bodies, all writhing together in eternal agony. It spoke with the voices of everyone who had died in the asylum. Thank you for the key. Thank you for the door. Thank you for bringing yourselves. Tendrils of darkness shot out, wrapping around Marcus. He didn't scream. He smiled as the darkness pulled him toward the doorway. Sarah lunged forward, grabbing his hand. For a moment she held on. Then she saw what was truly behind the door, and her mind began to fracture. It showed her the truth. Mercy Falls wasn't the only asylum built this way. There were dozens, all across America, all built on the same design, all with sub-basements, all with doors, all feeding the same hunger. And every one of them was waking up. It's not just here, Sarah whispered. It's everywhere, all the old asylums. They're all connected, and we just opened the first door. The thing laughed with 1,000 voices. The harvest begins. Marcus's hand slipped from Sarah's grasp. He disappeared into the void. The door began to close. Dr. Hartley grabbed Sarah. Run. They ran, up the stairs, through the basement, past Morrison, who was laughing and crying at the same time, through hallways that twisted and changed behind them, toward an exit that seemed to get further away with every step. Behind them they heard it coming, rising through the building, spreading through every floor, every room, every cell. The asylum was no longer just a building. It was alive, and it was hungry. They burst through the main doors as the sun was rising. Behind them, every window in Mercy Falls lit up at once, not with light, with faces. Hundreds of faces pressed against the glass from inside, all watching, all smiling. The building shuddered once, then stood still. Sarah collapsed on the grass, gasping. Dr. Hartley checked her camera with shaking hands. "Did you get it?" Sarah asked. Dr. Hartley played back the footage. It showed them entering the sub-basement, showed Marcus at the door, showed the moment it opened. But where the void should have been, the camera showed only static. And in the static, a message appeared in white text. "Thank you for letting us out." Police cars arrived, fire trucks, ambulances. Morrison stumbled out behind them, his hair completely white. They watched first responders approach the asylum, watched the building's doors open invitingly, watched as officers began walking inside. Sarah tried to warn them, tried to tell them to stay out. But her voice wouldn't work. None of them could speak. The thing in the asylum had taken their voices, taken their ability to warn others. All they could do was watch as more people entered. And as the sun climbed higher, Sarah saw movement in the woods beyond the asylum. Other buildings, other institutions, places that had been abandoned for decades. They were lighting up one by one, waking up. The harvest had begun. Somewhere in the darkness of the sub-basement, Marcus Webb stood before the open door, no longer entirely human, whispering the locations of every connected asylum to the thing that wore his face. 7 other asylums in Maine alone, 14 in Massachusetts, 23 in New York, each one built with the same blueprint, each one with a sub-basement, each one with a door. And now that the first door was open, the others would follow. The thing behind the door had been patient for 90 years. It could wait a little longer. It had all the time in the world. And it had Marcus to help spread the word. If you want to know how this ends, subscribe to the channel. The Mercy Falls Asylum, Part 7 of 7 final. 3 days after the door opened, Sarah sat in an FBI interrogation room in Portland. She couldn't speak. None of them could, but she could write. Director James Cross from Washington, D.C., read her statement for the 3rd time. "You're telling me that 44 abandoned asylums across America are all connected to some kind of supernatural entity?" Sarah nodded and wrote, "Check them, you'll see." Cross made calls. Sarah watched through the mirror. In another room, Dr. Hotley was writing her own statement. Morrison sat with his hair turned completely white, staring at nothing. Cross's phone rang. He listened and his face went pale. Say that again. He listened more. All three. He met Sarah's eyes. Don't let anyone inside. I'm on my way. He sat down heavily. Ravenswood Asylum in Massachusetts, Blackwood State Hospital in New York, St. Helena's Treatment Center in Vermont, all showing activity. Lights in windows, movement inside. Local police sent officers in. They haven't come out. Sarah wrote, it's SDRTING. The harvest, just like MARCUS said. Cross pulled out a thick file, photos of abandoned asylums across America. I've been tracking this for 6 months. 7 months ago, construction crew in Ohio tried to renovate Riverside Psychiatric Center. Built in 1928, the entire crew vanished. Equipment still there, vehicles still there, but no bodies, no blood. He laid out more photos. 5 months ago, same thing at Hollowbrook Asylum in Pennsylvania. Built in 1931. Security footage showed workers entering. Never showed them leaving, but showed lights turning on inside, floor by floor. More photos, more asylums, more disappearances. All built between 1928 and 1934. All designed by a small group of architects who all died within months of completing their work. All suicides. Sarah wrote they knew what they were building. The symbols, the sub-basements, the doors. Mercy Falls is spreading, Cross said after another call. Entities in the town. People seeing figures in medical uniforms walking the streets. Sarah wrote, MARCUS is calling them. Stop HIM or every asylum OPENS. Cross ordered a containment team. Bring flamethrowers. Sarah wrote, fire stop it. It's all I've got. That night, Sarah was released but ordered to stay in town. She drove to a motel 6 miles from Mercy Falls. From her window, she could see the asylum on the hill. It was glowing. Every window blazed with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. A photo, Marcus standing in the sub-basement. The door behind him fully open, and through the door she could see them. Thousands of them. The entity had been feeding on suffering for 90 years, and now it had enough power to take form. Multiple forms. The text below read, come home Sarah, bring the others, we're waiting. She threw the phone across the room. But it rang and rang and rang. Finally she answered. Marcus's voice came through, but it wasn't just Marcus. It was layered with hundreds of other voices. You can't run from this. You opened the door when you came to investigate. You became part of the pattern, part of the harvest. You're not Marcus, she tried to say, but no sound came out. Marcus is still here. He's with us now, part of us. He understands what we are, what we've always been. We didn't come through the doors, Sarah. We were always here, in the walls, in the stones, in the very foundation. The asylums were built to feed us, and now we're strong enough to leave. Sarah hung up and ran. She wrote to Cross, I need to go back in. Absolutely not. MARCUS is still alive. Part of HIM. I can reach HIM. Close THE door. How? With MEMORIS. Good MEMORIS. The entity feeds on suffering. But these places weren't always evil. Some people CARED. Those MEMORIS are in the WALLS too. Cross studied her. What do you need? The key, a team, and proof that light EXISTED there. 4 hours later, Sarah stood at the entrance to Mercy Falls one more time. Dr. Hotley and Morrison stood beside her, all three wearing protective gear, all three carrying photographs. Not of patients, of staff, of doctors and nurses who had genuinely tried to help people before the asylum became corrupted, before it became a feeding ground. The entity feeds on suffering, Dr. Hotley had written in her briefing. But these places weren't always evil. Some people here actually cared. Some moments were genuinely kind. Those memories are in the walls too, buried, forgotten, but still there. The plan was simple. Get to the subbasement, find Marcus, show him the photographs, remind him of why he became a paranormal investigator in the first place, to help people, to bring light to darkness. It was a terrible plan. It would probably fail, but it was all they had. They entered the asylum. The hallways were crowded now. Figures in medical uniforms walked past them, translucent but solid enough to touch. None of them attacked. They just watched. "They're waiting," Morrison signed, "waiting to see if we'll join them." They descended, through the basement, down to the sub-basement. Marcus stood before the open door, but he wasn't alone anymore. The entity stood with him, wearing 1,000 faces at once. Sarah held up the first photograph. A nurse named Helen who had sung lullabies to the children's ward in 1947, who had stayed late every night to make sure no child went asleep afraid. Marcus's black eyes flickered. For just a moment, they were his own eyes again. Dr. Hotley held up another. Dr. Thomas, who had fought the administration in 1956 to improve conditions, who had lost his job for advocating for patients' rights. Morrison held up a third, Janitor Robert, who had smuggled in candy for patients in 1972, who had learned every patient's name and remembered their birthdays. One by one, they showed Marcus the proof that Mercy Falls hadn't always been a place of suffering, that good people had tried, that genuine kindness had existed within these walls, that light had lived here, even in the darkness. And slowly, impossibly, Marcus's hand reached toward the door. Not to open it wider, to close it. The entity screamed with 1,000 voices. The building shook. The foundations cracked. The figures in the hallways began to swarm toward them. But Marcus kept pushing, his hands on the iron door, blood running from his nose, his ears, his eyes. But he was smiling, really smiling with his own smile. The photographs in their hands began to glow, not with the sickly pulse of the asylum's corrupted light, with something warmer, something older, something true. The memories were fighting back. Every act of kindness, every moment of genuine care, every person who had tried to help, all of it was still there, woven into the walls alongside the suffering. And it was stronger than the entity had expected. Marcus slammed the door shut with a sound like thunder, turned the key. The lock clicked with a sound like a prayer being answered. The entity howled. Too late, the door was closed. Marcus threw the key across the room with his last strength. It landed at Sarah's feet. "Destroy it," he whispered in his own voice. Then darkness took him and he collapsed. They grabbed Marcus and ran. Behind them, the sub-basement collapsed, the entity retreating, not destroyed, but contained. They burst out at dawn. FBI teams rushed in. Medical teams surrounded them. Cross met them. "Did you close it?" Sarah nodded, handed him the key with one word taped to it: destroy. "What about the other asylums?" Sarah wrote, "Each has its own key. Each needs to be closed with MEMORIS, with proof that light EXISTED. That could take years. Yes, and it will fight US every step." Cross bagged the key. "Then we'd better get started." 3 months later, Sarah stood at Blackwood State Hospital in New York. New team, new investigators, same mission. Morrison and Dr. Hotley prepared equipment. In the van, Marcus sat quietly. He could speak again, barely. The doctors said he'd recover, maybe. But his eyes still held shadows. He'd seen what was behind the door, been part of it. Part of it would always be with him. Sarah's voice had returned 2 weeks ago. Her first words were a promise. "We're going to close every door, all of them." She meant it. The harvest had begun, but so had the resistance. As long as people remembered that light could exist even in the darkest places, there was hope. Blackwood's door stood open, waiting. Sarah took a breath and walked toward it. This was going to be a long war, but it was worth fighting. One asylum at a time, one door at a time, one memory at a time. The darkness would not win. Not today. The end. Thank you for following the Mercy Falls Asylum story. Subscribe to the channel for more true crime and mystery stories. C. Cross made calls. Sarah watched through the mirror. In another room, Dr. Hotley was writing her own statement. Morrison sat with his hair turned completely white, staring at nothing. Cross's phone rang. He listened and his face went pale. Say that again. He listened more. All three. He met Sarah's eyes. Don't let anyone inside. I'm on my way. He sat down heavily. Ravenswood Asylum in Massachusetts, Blackwood State Hospital in New York, St. Helena's Treatment Center in Vermont, all showing activity. Lights in windows, movement inside. Local police sent officers in. They haven't come out. Sarah wrote, it's STRTING. The harvest, just like MARCUS said. Cross pulled out a thick file, photos of abandoned asylums across America. I've been tracking this for 6 months. 7 months ago, construction crew in Ohio tried to renovate Riverside Psychiatric Center. Built in 1928, the entire crew vanished. Equipment still there, vehicles still there, but no bodies, no blood. He laid out more photos. 5 months ago, same thing at Hollowbrook Asylum in Pennsylvania. Built in 1931. Security footage showed workers entering. Never showed them leaving, but showed lights turning on inside, floor by floor. More photos, more asylums, more disappearances. All built between 1928 and 1934. All designed by a small group of architects who all died within months of completing their work. All suicides. Sarah wrote, they knew what they were building. The symbols, the sub-basements, the doors. Mercy Falls is spreading, Cross said after another call. Entities in the town. People seeing figures in medical uniforms walking the streets. Sarah wrote, MARCUS is calling them. Stop HIM or every asylum OPENS. Cross ordered a containment team. Bring flamethrowers. Sarah wrote, fire stop it. It's all I've got. That night, Sarah was released but ordered to stay in town. She drove to a motel 6 miles from Mercy Falls. From her window, she could see the asylum on the hill. It was glowing. Every window blazed with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. A photo, Marcus standing in the sub-basement. The door behind him fully open, and through the door she could see them. Thousands of them. The entity had been feeding on suffering for 90 years, and now it had enough power to take form. Multiple forms. The text below read, come home Sarah, bring the others, we're waiting. She threw the phone across the room. But it rang and rang and rang. Finally she answered. Marcus's voice came through, but it wasn't just Marcus. It was layered with hundreds of other voices. You can't run from this. You opened the door when you came to investigate. You became part of the pattern, part of the harvest. You're not Marcus, she tried to say, but no sound came out. Marcus is still here. He's with us now, part of us. He understands what we are, what we've always been. We didn't come through the doors, Sarah. We were always here, in the walls, in the stones, in the very foundation. The asylums were built to feed us, and now we're strong enough to leave. Sarah hung up and ran. She wrote to Cross, I need to go back in. Absolutely not. MARCUS is still alive. Part of HIM. I can reach HIM. Close THE door. How? With MEMORIS. Good MEMORIS. The entity feeds on suffering. But these places weren't always evil. Some people CARED. Those MEMORIS are in the WALLS too. Cross studied her. What do you need? The key, a team, and proof that light EXISTED there. 4 hours later, Sarah stood at the entrance to Mercy Falls one more time. Dr. Hotley and Morrison stood beside her, all three wearing protective gear, all three carrying photographs. Not of patients, of staff, of doctors and nurses who had genuinely tried to help people before the asylum became corrupted, before it became a feeding ground. The entity feeds on suffering, Dr. Hotley had written in her briefing. But these places weren't always evil. Some people here actually cared. Some moments were genuinely kind. Those memories are in the walls too, buried, forgotten, but still there. The plan was simple. Get to the subbasement, find Marcus, show him the photographs, remind him of why he became a paranormal investigator in the first place, to help people, to bring light to darkness. It was a terrible plan. It would probably fail, but it was all they had. They entered the asylum. The hallways were crowded now. Figures in medical uniforms walked past them, translucent but solid enough to touch. None of them attacked. They just watched. "They're waiting," Morrison signed, "waiting to see if we'll join them." They descended, through the basement, down to the sub-basement. Marcus stood before the open door, but he wasn't alone anymore. The entity stood with him, wearing 1,000 faces at once. Sarah held up the first photograph. A nurse named Helen who had sung lullabies to the children's ward in 1947, who had stayed late every night to make sure no child went asleep afraid. Marcus's black eyes flickered. For just a moment, they were his own eyes again. Dr. Hotley held up another. Dr. Thomas, who had fought the administration in 1956 to improve conditions, who had lost his job for advocating for patients' rights. Morrison held up a third, Janitor Robert, who had smuggled in candy for patients in 1972, who had learned every patient's name and remembered their birthdays. One by one, they showed Marcus the proof that Mercy Falls hadn't always been a place of suffering, that good people had tried, that genuine kindness had existed within these walls, that light had lived here, even in the darkness. And slowly, impossibly, Marcus's hand reached toward the door. Not to open it wider, to close it. The entity screamed with 1,000 voices. The building shook. The foundations cracked. The figures in the hallways began to swarm toward them. But Marcus kept pushing, his hands on the iron door, blood running from his nose, his ears, his eyes, but he was smiling, really smiling with his own smile. The photographs in their hands began to glow, not with the sickly pulse of the asylum's corrupted light, with something warmer, something older, something true. The memories were fighting back, every act of kindness, every moment of genuine care, every person who had tried to help. All of it was still there, woven into the walls alongside the suffering. And it was stronger than the entity had expected. Marcus slammed the door shut with a sound like thunder, turned the key. The lock clicked with a sound like a prayer being answered. The entity howled. Too late, the door was closed. Marcus threw the key across the room with his last strength. It landed at Sarah's feet. "Destroy it," he whispered in his own voice. Then darkness took him and he collapsed. They grabbed Marcus and ran. Behind them, the sub-basement collapsed, the entity retreating, not destroyed, but contained. They burst out at dawn. FBI teams rushed in. Medical teams surrounded them. Cross met them. "Did you close it?" Sarah nodded, handed him the key with one word taped to it: destroy. "What about the other asylums?" Sarah wrote, "Each has its own key. Each needs to be closed with MEMORIS, with proof that light EXISTED. That could take years. Yes, and it will fight US every step." Cross bagged the key. "Then we'd better get started." 3 months later, Sarah stood at Blackwood State Hospital in New York. New team, new investigators, same mission. Morrison and Dr. Hotley prepared equipment. In the van, Marcus sat quietly. He could speak again, barely. The doctors said he'd recover. Maybe. but his eyes still held shadows. He'd seen what was behind the door, been part of it. Part of it would always be with him. Sarah's voice had returned 2 weeks ago. Her first words were a promise. We're going to close every door, all of them. She meant it. The harvest had begun, but so had the resistance. As long as people remembered that light could exist even in the darkest places, there was hope. Blackwood's door stood open, waiting. Sarah took a breath and walked toward it. This was going to be a long war, but it was worth fighting. One asylum at a time, one door at a time, one memory at a time. The darkness would not win. Not today. The end. Thank you for following the Mercy Falls Asylum story. Subscribe to the channel for more true crime and mystery stories.